How can we play in high positions more comfortably? It's very easy for the left hand to really tense up when we're up in the stratosphere up there, especially on the lower strings. Now, there are a lot of things we can do with the bow to get the sound to open up, but the problem that I keep noticing in myself and in others is that it can be very difficult to really pay attention to the bow, you know, the thing that's making the sound, when we are so distracted by what's going on here. So one of my biggest goals in the practice room is to become so confident about what my left hand is doing that I can spend more and more of my time paying attention to the bow. Hey, this is Ina Langerman from Violinna.live, and in this video I'm going to give you 5 tips for playing in high positions. I'm talking about past 7th position, more comfortably, especially for those of you with smaller hands like me. And be sure to stick around till the end, because I'm also going to talk a little bit about finding a comfortable vibrato up there, which can be very tricky. So just a quick disclaimer before I start. Please keep in mind that all of our hands and anatomies are different from one another. So everything that I demonstrate in this video may or may not serve you 100%. So if you are taking violin lessons right now, please consult with your private teacher. I am just here to share my own experience and knowledge with you. All right, so here we go. Number 1. So the first thing we need to do is practice the fundamental path that our thumb is going to be taking from the low positions into the high positions. So some of you watching might already know this, but let's review anyway. So starting from first position, the thumb takes this path up the neck, and then right here it's going to start going under, and it's going to reach this part of the neck where it meets the body of the instrument. So first you want to practice this path with the thumb. Now, for the smaller hands like mine, the thumb might have an additional path to go. So for me, I also practice going from here right over here, so the fingerboard continues here. I always try to make contact with the fingerboard if I'm coming around like this with the thumb. So let's put it all together. Let's assume that you do have to do that. So let's say if you have to play up here on the fingerboard, that keeping the thumb back there is not working out because it's too far for your 4th finger to reach. So your path would probably look something like this. So we're starting over here, going under right there, and then on this side it continues a little bit towards where the body of the violin is starting, and you might even place the side of the thumb where it begins right here. You might even put that against the rib of the violin to help you out. Okay, so practicing this, that's our step 1. And as you're doing, please keep in mind that our goal is to keep the elbow in the place where it's going to prevent the wrist from doing this weird shape. I talked about it in my previous video about left hand shape. The last thing you want to do is have your wrist doing this, because it's very dangerous and you can get injured. You want to keep a straight line here. Of course, when you're playing in high positions, your wrist is going to be coming out that way, which in low positions we don't do. We don't do this in low positions. So when you come up, your wrist will go like this, but you want to be careful that you don't do that, because that's dangerous. So that leads me to step number 2. For everybody who watched my video on left hand frame, specifically for small hands, you might remember that I talked a lot about optimizing the weight distribution toward the 3rd finger in order to make sure that all 4 fingers can comfortably reach from above the string, because the motion has to come from the base knuckle when we put our fingers down, no matter what position we're in, right? So we're going to practice gliding up and down the string with our 3rd finger, together with the thumb path that we just created. Again, we're doing the 3rd finger because that's the finger that's going to help us with that weight distribution. Of course, you can practice this with other fingers as well, right? But to save you time, let's just do it with the 3rd finger. I'll come a little closer so you can see. So right now my thumb is going here and my 3rd finger is going to continue right there. And now if I want to go higher and I'm not able to go any higher here because of my hands, my thumb is going to come out this way. Okay, maybe even a little higher there. Okay, so once again, you can see from here. There. So that's step 2. Now, just for comparison, I'll just show you what poor weight distribution looks like. So I'm going to do the same gliding motion, but I'll do it with my first finger. Oftentimes, the poor weight distribution happens when we optimize it for the first or second finger, and then these two fingers get left behind. So if I do the same exercise with the first finger, but I don't think about what I just did, if I don't think about my hand shape and how my elbow is coming around, look what might happen. Right, so I'm going up into the high positions, everything's fine, right? And okay, that's cool, but look what the problem is. I can't even reach with my other fingers. I can barely reach with my second finger. So this is an example of poor weight distribution. Now, in some cases, I will choose to do something like this on purpose, especially if I'm playing a passage that ends on a second finger up there, and I really know I don't need to do third and fourth. But for the most part, when you're practicing, very, very important that you're optimizing for this third finger, because let's do a good one again. I'll show it on the E string. Maybe it's even easier to see from here. So when I do it with my third finger, right away, it's no problem. I can put down my pinky and I can put down all my other fingers. All right. Okay, so now tip number 3 is attention to your posture. So one very common tendency that happens as a result from having to get your elbow around is this bad habit of hunching forward like this. I think we've all been there. I've definitely caught myself doing it so many times. And if you're doing it in the middle of a piece, it's much more difficult to notice that you're doing it. So, doing this, it's going to cause a lot of tightness in your shoulders, which will lead down to your arms, and then you'll wonder why it's difficult to play, something that you practiced, in scales maybe. And if you get nervous on stage, hunching forward like this is not going to help you. It's like my worst enemy is doing this. So I always try to pay attention to make sure I'm not doing that, because I know that that's the number one thing that causes tension for me. Okay, so just watch out for that. One thing that helps many violinists actually is when you're playing in high positions is to bring the instrument just a little bit higher. Because bringing the instrument just slightly higher, not too much, it actually helps gravity work a little bit in your favor as you're shifting up. And for both hands, actually, when we're in high positions, the bow has to come a little bit closer to the bridge. So doing this will actually help the bow find a good sounding point. So for example, on the E string, this helps me reach the note more comfortably. Also notice where my thumb is, right? And also what it prevented my elbow from hitting myself, okay? So that's another thing. If you notice that your elbow is like this against you, you might want to bring your instrument a little bit higher. Just don't overdo the whole bringing instrument higher thing, because if you do it too much, you might run into this problem. The bow slips, falls on your face. We don't want that, right? Okay, so tip number 4. Now, as we know, as we already said, that the fingers have to come from above the string when we place them down, no matter what position we are in. So knowing this can lead to a very common mistake, and I've caught myself making this mistake. Be careful that your fingers don't fall forward like this. You see that where the nail is touching the fingerboard now? That's a really bad hand position for your hands. We always want to put down the fingers with the finger pad. If you notice that your fingers are doing this, that's really not good for your technique. It's gonna mess up your intonation. I really don't recommend it. Be on the lookout for contact. If you feel that your nail is starting to touch the fingerboard, it's usually a sign that you are coming around too much with your elbow. One thing that can help resolve this is to move your palm slightly away, just a little bit, and it usually solves that problem. Okay, so tip number 5 is using our left thumb as an anchor for the other fingers. So depending on your flexibility over here between this finger and this finger, and also depending on the size of your hand, but more about the flexibility, you may have to leave this location as I demonstrated earlier. So some people with bigger hands, they can reach all the way to the end of the fingerboard without having to leave this place with their thumb. They can reach all the way up here. Of course, I cannot do that. So what I have to do is actually move my thumb over, as you saw me doing earlier. So this is not just the idea of where to place your thumb, but it's also how to strategically place it that's going to make your hand feel more comfortable. So what happens is that if, let's say, I tell myself I'm going to leave my thumb back there for as long as I possibly can and go as high as I want, as I can, like this, for example. It's like, okay, great, I reached this location on my fingerboard. However, if you take a look right over here, this is kind of maxed out. It's very uncomfortable. It's creating a lot of tension. I've only been holding it for a few seconds. It's already creating some pain. That's not good. So don't be a hero. If you need to move your thumb away from there, you know, go ahead and do so. You want this space right over here to be relaxed. You want it to be not stuck, you know, like this. It's maxed out, it's stuck. You don't want that. You want it to be loose here to create comfort, and that way you'll be able to do vibrato, you'll be able to play more in tune, etc., right? One more thing that really helps me in addition to this is that when I come out of this place over here, is that the bottom of my thumb right over here, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, the thumb actually begins down here. Most people think that the thumb is over here, but actually this is our thumb right here. It's kind of hard to believe when I learned this. So if you place this part of your thumb, or I guess right by your wrist, on top of the instrument, on top of the ribs right here, and rest it like this, it can be very helpful. It can be helpful to relax the hand a little bit more. It definitely helps me, especially in the lower strings, especially if I'm high on G. I do this a lot. I rest the side of my palm or the base of my thumb over here, and it's much easier to reach these notes. It's easier to vibrate them. So it depends on your hand again. This is something that's been very helpful for me, and it's also going to prevent injuries. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about vibrato in the high positions. And of course, the most common question is, do I use an arm vibrato or wrist vibrato up there? And I've seen tons of YouTube videos on this topic, some really, really good ones. And the most common answer I saw for this was arm vibrato, arm vibrato, arm vibrato. So I'm going to be really real with you here. And once again, this depends. Remember that you have to take into account your personal anatomy, which includes not just the size of your hand, but things like the proportions among your fingers, and very important, the flexibility, the range of motion, specifically here. I've seen hands where the thumb goes way out this way, and this angle is more than 90 degrees. I can only really do 90 degrees, but I've seen hands that can go way further than that. So I'm just going to share with you here my personal preference and what's been working for me best. And who knows, that might change next year. We'll see, right? So let me put this bow down. When I put the side of my palm down on top like this, which I most definitely have to do for the lower strings, once I'm resting it like this, I have to do wrist vibrato. You know, I can't really do arm vibrato, because if I do arm vibrato like this, the whole instrument is going to shake. That's not going to work. So wrist vibrato feels very, very comfortable. Now, on the other hand, if say I'm on the E string and I'm playing first or second finger, sometimes the other fingers too, I am not resting the side of the palm against the violin. So if I'm not resting it, then I'll opt for arm vibrato like this. And even sometimes, even if I go all the way up here, if I'm not resting, I'll do arm vibrato, or I might opt for wrist vibrato if I decide to make that connection here. For me, especially with a third finger, wrist vibrato tends to be better up there, but again, it depends. It depends on the music, depends on how much amplitude I want to do. For those with bigger hands who actually get to keep their thumb back there for the highest positions, then they don't have to make that contact over here. So if you are someone who leaves your thumb back there, I would say arm vibrato is the way to go. It creates a little bit more amplitude. Of course, keep in mind also with regards to amplitude that the half steps up here, they're much closer to each other than in first position. So physically, you won't need to do as much amplitude over here as you would in first position. Of course, this also depends on what music you're playing and what it asks for. Okay, so if you want to continue practicing vibrato, here's a video with 3 of my favorite exercises. If you found this video helpful, please share it with a friend or a colleague. And thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, sign up for my bi-monthly newsletter, and happy practicing.